Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to RoahmMythrill 3, and it's time for the judge commentary on the last couple of stages we just played through. Starting with 128th place, Mega Man Dev by Prince Myriad. This stage got a 43.8, with a 2 in difficulty, 11.2 in design, 9.8 in fun, 7.4 in creativity, 7.6 in aesthetics, and 7.8 in functionality. Mick. Well, this certainly has an unorthodox crowd. The majority of these enemies are distinct from the usual suspects, being primarily Drillins and Ellicotts, with the odd Bolton and Nutton being the only regular face. Unfortunately, the only real praise I can give is for the unique enemies. Well, then the level is rarely outright unfair, even with some less than safe introductions like the Count Bomb Room. This has a fine set of building blocks, but the execution feels uninspired. The only real interesting moments are a few Drillins or the Count Bomb Room, and the only frustrating moment was the introduction of invisible blocks. I thought the level was broken when I ran into those, and I can't say I was impressed when the realization hit. Otherwise, everything's just there. The level doesn't do much of anything, even though it has a fair number of gimmicks, and the weirdly relaxing atmosphere only manages to feel boring. That some of the graphics are obvious placeholders doesn't exactly help that issue. Of particular note are the bosses. There are 4 fights here, and all of them are pushovers. Skullwalker's attacks are a complete non-threat when he's isolated on an island. The move hover deflects the med cannon shots, meaning it can't hurt you, and Dev, for all his build-up, just stands there and shoots you. Most of his attacks are dodged by just jumping and shooting next to the boss door, so he can barely hurt you. Frankly, it's a big letdown, and while it wasn't terrible to play, I can't say I enjoyed it in the end. Shinryu. I wasn't really sure what to expect when I first saw the name of this level, but the end result was more than a little messy, to put it mildly. The level design here is very odd, and not in a good/quirky kind of way. There are several questionable things in this stage, most of which stem from the room layouts. A good chunk of them pose almost no threat at all, such as the room with a single press-in that you don't even need to fight to progress. Immediately after that room, however, you're put into a think fast situation where you're suddenly standing on top of count bombs. This is also the first and only time the count bombs show up in this stage for that matter. While the level's other gimmicks do get used more than once, they're used only in the most basic of ways. The Yoku blocks are a slight exception to this since they show up as brief tells for the invisible maze section. Okay, so I think that answers the question I had. I guess it wasn't actually a timing thing of really having to race. The Yoku blocks were just giving you a momentary look at the maze, but it was always there the whole time, just invisible. At least that's what I'm getting from this comment. That could have been interesting if there was more to it, and if it had a better introduction. Although I did figure out pretty quickly that you need to slide to get into that screen, it's still a case of bad conveyance. Yeah, I did get very confused when I found that. Lastly, we have the matter of the end boss. For as much as he's built up through those text boxes, he's not really all that threatening. Standing on the far left of the room more or less ensures you'll never be hit by his junk block attack, and you'll have more than enough time to react to his other projectiles. His Shield of Saturn rings actually makes him even easier, seeing as they can drop items like large health pickups and extra lives. Ah! I can't help but wonder whether or not he was supposed to move at all, since that might have actually made him at least a little more challenging. Either way, he's a pretty big anticlimax for a stage that unfortunately doesn't have much to it. Patchy. I'm blue, da-ba-dee da-ba-da. I don't think I've ever heard that full song, but what little I've heard of it is weirdly catchy. I have no idea what the song's about, but non sequitur. Well, right off the bat, I can't say I really agree with the aesthetic choice here. Bright blue background on bright blue tile set can be quite a bit jarring to look at. It also makes it hard to distinguish the actual geometry. I'm probably a little weird in the sense that overall blue doesn't really bother me like that, as long as it's just background details. It's when enemies blend into said blue background that it starts becoming a problem, which I guess you actually did kind of have in this stage with the Nuttons and Boltons. Then we have these obviously placeholder textures for the top solids. Is the joke supposed to be that this stage takes place in a blueprint, hence dev, as in development? There are also some mismatched collision placements in the room with the first skull mini-boss, which makes the stage seem amateurish in terms of polish for sure. The stage itself doesn't have much going on in it, essentially a not-so-mini gauntlet of mini-bosses you find in the dev kit. Sprinkle in some intermission gimmick platforms of the day in between and boom, you have a mediocre stage. Kinda annoying that you have to fight the skull mini-boss each time after respawning from the checkpoint. There is a maze of invisible blocks, oh gosh, it does occasionally reveal the block placements in the form of Yoku blocks, but still, I can't imagine such a concept would ever be remotely fun in any situation. I think there are ways it could maybe be used, but it is definitely a thing that whether or not you found it fun, as opposed to like frustrating or whatever, it would definitely be a your mileage may vary kind of thing. Florida the secret token that is invisible is a weird choice. It actually got me killed the first playthrough because RushJet collided with the invisible block that I couldn't quite see. Oh dear. The boss, Development Man, I guess? If we go by the stage name, he is just standing there, menacingly. Yeah, he really is. His movement module seems to be in development still, if one were to guess. Also, he is literally throwing random BS at you. That is pretty silly. Flashman85. I'm on board with the premise of Wily assembling the components for a super mashup robot. Unfortunately, this level squanders that premise. Let's talk storytelling. The text boxes paint a confusing picture of the narrative, and it wasn't until fighting the boss that I had any idea what was going on. Did Wily go back in time? Who would have helped to explain exactly what preservation technology does, define dev somewhere, and move all the text boxes out of missable secret rooms? Moreover, the aesthetics and gameplay should sync up with the story. Although the music is a good fit, but in need of better looping, the graphics, especially the flagrant placeholder ones, don't really feel connected at all. A mashup of hazards from Bomb Man, Dust Man, Saturn, etc. would have made more sense than a seemingly random and unfocused assortment of death traps. I'll give you credit for the drill-in sections, and the one area where move hovers are used to cross a large gap. Those are effective. I really like the concept of the Yoku maze. Power-ups are doled out at a decent pace, and most challenges are innocuous enough that I can live with the skew checkpoint placement. There are good points, but there are so many more problems. Inconsistent labeling of pits and transitions, inexplicably invisible collision objects, inadequate challenge introductions, count bombs, dies in a panic, unsafe screen transitions, duplicate checkpoint objects, ladder reverse difficulty curves, ladder jumping keeps getting easier, the unnecessary key door, just move that screen's entrance to where the key is located, questionable boss programming, Saturn rings don't do damage. So they don't do damage, but they can provide pickups. Oh dear. I'm only scratching the surface. More than anything, though, I'm scratching my head. This level leaves me highly confused. The story, aesthetics, and gameplay all seem to be going in different directions, and I'm unsure whether any of those elements has a destination in mind. And a spark. I think it is obvious that there was effort put into this level, but even an initial playthrough makes it obvious this level was not tested. It looks to me like you designed the level thinking objects did something different to what you expected. The MagMammal community is very open, and most people participating in the competition would have been willing to have a look through your level and give advice. Hopefully you will participate in future, as the ideas in the level do show promise. The level has an overabundance of gimmicks, almost all of which are introduced in a dangerous setting, usually with fatal consequences if the player does not recognize them quickly. There is normally never a follow-up to the gimmicks, and on occasion they behaved inconsistently. For example, the Yoku blocks act like an entirely different gimmick in the maze room. Mega Man levels use a few gimmicks and try to use them in original ways once introduced. There were a couple of places in the level where the objects placed did not work as intended. Did you know that napalm fire can be removed with weapons? Dustman blocks can also be destroyed. Where these appear, you can fall through the floor to a previous room. Oh no! I didn't even think about that. I'm also not sure if the mini-bosses worked as intended, as they were completely non-threatening due to their placement. The second Doc Kumo seemed to be stuck in the middle of the room because of broken collision. The level looked fairly nice, and I really enjoyed how atmospheric it was, but the level overall was hindered by most of the background and foreground being the same shade of blue. Certain enemies also blended into the background almost perfectly, such as a Nutton and Bolton. Yep, pretty much my thought on that. These particular enemies often unexpectedly hit the player out of nowhere due to positioning and crowded room layouts. I like the idea behind the boss, but much like the mini-bosses throughout the level, it does not move, so it hardly ever threatens the player. Realistically, only 2 of the attacks had any chance of hurting you, and one of those is because it blended into the black background. Your boss was certainly better than nothing, but you should plan to add movement to future Robot Masters. So, yeah, I don't really think anything was said here that I disagree with. The stage was okay, but at the same time, it didn't really push the envelope, and while I am glad there was an attempt at a custom boss at the end, it wasn't a very difficult one. The fact that it just sits there and takes punishment from you, yeah. It is an interesting premise, but I also do agree with some of the things that were said there. If you're going to go to the trouble of having the storyline be all about this weird mishmash going on that Wily's working on, making the stage itself reflect that, I think, would have been better than just, than, like, what we got. Like, having some of the assets here in that setting could have worked, but also including some stuff that really calls into the Robot Masters that were combined in the end. And, yeah, taking a bit more time to polish up the end boss. For all his build-up, he really didn't do too much, admittedly. But, overall, I think the ideas here do show promise. So, again, it's a case of, I don't think it's a bad stage, it just needed a bit more polish. Like, in the end, I admittedly don't know that this is one that's going to stick in my mind as very memorable, but especially, I'm assuming this was like kind of an early attempt, like a first attempt at entering one of these. Honestly, not bad for a first attempt, and as usual, anything I say take with a grain of salt. I am terrible at level design. We know this. I'm the one that did a custom Zelda quest and decided that filling the third dungeon with blue dark nuts was completely reasonable. What was I thinking? I don't think I was. Anyway, 127th place, Mint Candy Matrix by Sir Sins. 44 even with a 2 in difficulty, 13.8 in design, 10.2 in fun, 5.2 in creativity, 5.6 in aesthetics, and 9.2 in functionality. Mick. This level has nothing to do with mints or candy, though I suppose it is minty green. As a whole, this level is alright, at least when it comes to the gimmick execution. It covers the basics that you'd want to hit, introducing sheet blocks and concrete platforms, and steadily ramping them up to become more difficult. It's short and efficient, which isn't the worst thing to be. The setups even manage to feel creative. Certainly I haven't seen them combined in the same ways this place does. Unfortunately, the enemy design is kind of a mess. I remember a large variety, all of which are used once or twice with little fanfare. Big Snakey has some fanfare at least, though the first encounter being the more complicated one is a bit backwards. Returning Sniper Joe is also an exception, but he's really easy to take out from afar, even with basically every weapon disabled but mag shock, which makes me wonder why this bother disabling things. And the final spike ceiling is easily ignored. Combined with tiles that don't animate and music that doesn't loop properly, and the rest of the level is on the mediocre end. English, take 2. Respectable gimmick design, but this needs to work on the rest. Also, maybe being a little longer wouldn't hurt. Shinryu. Well, first off, why is every weapon locked out except for Magnetic Shockwave? I personally can't think of any good reason for this since there's nothing in this level that seems to warrant it. Aside from that, this is an incredibly short stage with very little going on. The only notable things here include a think fast moment with a concrete man platform, which will dump you into some spikes if you don't react quick enough, and the final section of the level, which has some tightly timed platforming involving those sheep man blocks. The idea of making you jump into the next screen transition once the blocks disappear is certainly different, but it's not exactly practical or much fun either. Really, that's about all there is to this stage. It definitely could have benefited from being a lot longer and having more involved challenges, that much is certain. Patchy. Will you take the blue mint or the red mint? It's a decent little level, even though it has that somewhat unpolished feeling, as evidenced by the Sheepman tile set not animating, music not looping properly, one of the checkpoint respawns putting the player in midair, etc. I do like how the stage utilizes the Sheepman block gimmick in various ways, definitely the strong point of the level. Also neat when it starts interacting with the up and down platforms, though it does get a bit repetitive towards the end, where you just wait for the wall to disappear and jump at the right moment to the next near-identical obstacle. Quickman is a fine way to sum up this quick little stage. Not gonna lie, it's been a couple of days since I played these stages, and now actually recording the commentary, I forgot Quickman was actually there! Anyway, Flashman85. I can kinda see how certain foreground tiles might be casually described as mint candy. Sheepman graphics, if they were animated, could be reminiscent of the film The Matrix. The title partially makes sense, the gameplay does not. Disappearing blocks and rising-falling platforms are central gimmicks. The combination is different enough, but not terribly interesting or effective. All the most overused enemies in the franchise make a cameo, serving up stale challenges that merely look unique because there's a gimmick nearby, which has no bearing on the combat unless the player makes truly poor survival decisions. Other assets, including Quickman and a Stray Spring, show up just long enough to make me wonder why they're there. The difficulty stems mainly from dying suddenly after entering a new screen, due to either having no time to react to an immediate hazard, mistaking a pit for a screen transition, or entering at a perfectly valid angle that leads directly into a wall or pit. Inexplicably, every special weapon is absent except Magnetic Shockwave, which, for all the good it does outside the mini-boss fights, might as well have been disabled too. Despite lacking a bit of finesse in the implementation, appropriate checkpoints and sufficiently frequent power-ups keep this length-conscious, oddly scrolling averse level moving. The music is inoffensive, though improperly looped, and seemingly out of place. Nicely patterned backgrounds add some personality to the aesthetics. I like racing across alternating rising-falling platforms to grab a perilous power-up. That's the kind of meaningful complexity this level needs. Getting the jump timing right on a series of disappearing wall-floor combos is decently satisfying. Fighting a Joe with spikes overhead would have been great if the spikes actually posed a threat. The final stretch is not without its hiccups, but it starts to tell a story that I wish the rest of the level were a part of. And Ace Spark. Another example of adding Sniper Joes to a stage and making it significantly worse. When will people learn? I know that there are only 3 of them, but they are so horrendously out of place it brings the whole level down. They completely break any flow that the player gets into, waste the player's time, and aren't remotely challenging. The cheeky one on top of the checkpoint is not appreciated either. I know I have personal beef with the Sniper Joe that I had to fight every single time I didn't get the timing right on that quick alternating up-down, up-down, up-down segment of platforms toward the end. Having to fight that one again and again and again without Laser Trident to just get it out of the way quicker so I could get back there, that got old real fast. Aside from that, the stage varies wildly in quality, with some very interesting challenges, but some very frustrating duds. The stage comes alive whenever the sheep band blocks are utilized, with every instance being a new challenge. This works especially well during the final stretch when combined with the Concrete Man platforms, which offers a novel timing challenge that doesn't outstay its welcome. On the other hand, the enemies in the level were almost entirely irrelevant, and often detracted from the stage. The one major exception is the first Big Snakey, which is a neat, if out of place, take on the mini-boss. This is then let down by the second Big Snakey being worse in just about every way. Quickman was a net negative to the level, especially as you did not have any weapons that were effective. Ditto with the Joes. Graphically, the level ended up being quite dull, as it lacked the animation the original Sheepman stage had, robbing your level of life and any cohesion. I didn't think the music fit particularly well, but I admit that I may have a bias there, as I know it is from an ice level, so the score has not suffered here. So, yeah, this stage, it was a very quick-paced stage, and the puzzles overall, they were okay. Good platforming challenges. I'm not sure how I feel about that one that I kept dying to, though that may just be me. Toward the end, I got it, but I'm not sure how to do it without getting rid of those sheep blocks and thus dropping the one up. Obviously it can be done, Flashman85 seemed to do it, and I may just be overthinking it, but yeah, the timing there is pretty tight. Surprisingly not so much on getting dropped as it is on getting smashed into the ceiling. There are many Mega Man-shaped pancakes stuck to the ceiling, or roll-shaped actually. So yeah, that happened a lot. It is odd that after all of that, Quickman felt like a non-issue to me. He is, surprisingly, a lot easier to deal with when his AI actually works. Which, yeah, for those not in the know, in the original Mega Man 2, Quickman was so hard to comprehend because he glitches into the wall, and doing so messes up the pattern he is supposed to have. He actually works as intended here, and that makes him a lot easier, and it is weird to say that. It does make me wonder how much easier overall fighting Quickman Buster Only would be in his original arena if he worked properly. I don't know that I care about it that much to find out, though, because, yeah, he was the original Nightmare boss for a reason. But anyway, yeah, overall, this stage was okay. It's another that I don't know that it will really stick in my head. But, yeah, having to deal with that one Sniper Joe repeatedly because of messing up that timing platform challenge, having to do that so often, that was, admittedly, a bit of a bummer. But other than that, not a bad stage. So with that, thank you very much for watching, hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, Kitty! Bring back Tango, you cowards!